Welcome back to our news bulletin. With the global death toll rising above 279,000, the number of COVID-19 cases worldwide has surpassed 4 million. In the US, over 1,500 people have died in the past 24 hours as the country's death count exceeds 79,000. Spain has recorded its lowest coronavirus daily death toll since mid-March, with 143 fatalities in the last 24 hours. Now, further details will be found in this report.
The US remains the worst hit country from the coronavirus, with over a quarter of world's confirmed cases and a third of deaths. In New York, 3 children have died from a rare inflammatory syndrome believed to be linked to the coronavirus. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says it will evaluate how long the virus can survive.
We are aggressively evaluating how long this virus can survive and be infectious. And where on copper and steel, it's pretty typical. It's really pretty much about 2 hours. But I will say that on other surfaces, cardboard or plastic, it's longer. And so we are looking at this because we don't know the role of fomite transmission.
But there are continuing difficulties in stopping the coronavirus spread, even for nations that have been largely successful in curbing the first wave of the pandemic. The health authorities in northeast China have reported a new cluster of infections in a town near the Russian border. South Korea reported 34 new infections as a spate of transmissions linked to clubgoers threatens the country's hard-won gains in its fight against virus. President Moon Jae-in has warned against being complacent.
It will be a long time before the COVID-19 outbreak ends completely. We should also brace for pandemic's second wave, which many experts are predicting.
Meanwhile, in Australia, the state of New South Wales is reopening cafes and restaurants, playgrounds and outdoor pools from May 15th. But Premier Gladys Berejiklian has warned harsher restrictions could return if the social distancing requirements were not being followed or if there was a spike in cases.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has recorded nearly 2,000 new cases, its highest in a single day, taking total infections to over 29,000. The Health Ministry says the country's death toll has risen by 21 to 639. The ministry said so far over 8,000 people have recovered, while almost 250 remain critical. It said over 283,000 tests have been conducted across the country, with more than 13,300 taken in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Imran Khan has directed to chalk out a comprehensive strategy for raising awareness about COVID-19. This comes as YouTube CEO pledged $5 million for Pakistan in advertisement grants for awareness. In another news, Pakistan has rejected Indian accusations of not complying with World Court's decision regarding captured Indian spy Kulbhushan Yadav. Earlier, India's legal counsel Harish Salve said Delhi may have to go back to ICJ, alleging Islamabad not following the verdict. In a statement, Foreign Office spokesperson Aisha Farooqi said Pakistan is fully committed to verdict of International Court of Justice. She said Islamabad firmly rejects the Indian Council's baseless and inaccurate assertion regarding the country. The spokesperson said Pakistan has granted India consular access to Commander Yadav. Farooqi said Islamabad is processing measures for effective review as per guidelines provided by the ICJ in its judgment. Another proof of the dehumanizing acts by Indian forces in occupied Kashmir has emerged in a video doing the rounds on social media. Indian occupation forces can be seen humiliating and torturing a Kashmiri civilian. In the video, Tanveer Ahmad Malik can be seen tied from the neck as the soldier tugs away at the rope. Meanwhile, another kicks him as he loads his rifle and then proceeds to shout expletives at him. Meanwhile, Indian authorities have still not handed over the dead body of martyred freedom fighter Riaz Negu. The occupied valley is reeling under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the past 280 days. The crisis of migrant workers has worsened after South Indian state of Tamil Nadu has refused to allow them to go homes. Millions of migrants are either stranded on interstate borders or are living in temporary shelters amid nationwide curfew. Talking to media, rights activists said there is a complete lack of information about widespread chaos over the issue. They said state government is using an online form made for Indian expats which is in English and workers cannot understand it. Meanwhile, the migrants have rejected government's plan to take them by train, saying it has further worsened the situation. The Afghan government says it has found another 18 bodies of migrant workers allegedly drowned by the Iranian border force. Last week, the foreign ministry said over 50 Afghans were pushed into a river as they were trying to cross the border from Herat province. Talking to media, provincial officials said the bodies will be handed over to the families after the legal procedure. Earlier, authorities said they rescued 16 of the workers and found as many bodies, while 18 to 20 migrants are missing. Meanwhile, President Ashraf Ghani has formed a 10-member task force to investigate the incident. The Iranian Foreign Ministry has rejected all allegations, saying its border forces are not involved in the incident. Now in Afghanistan, the Taliban say they have released 28 more prisoners of the Afghan government in Herat province. The group had earlier released 100 inmates, including Afghan soldiers, under the Doha peace deal with the US. In a tweet, spokesperson Azhar Shahen said the group took this step in an effort to expedite the prisoners' release process. He said the prisoners were sent home by giving each of them clothes and 5,000 Afghan rupees as transportation fare. Meanwhile, Kabul says it has released 1,000 Taliban prisoners on assurances that they will remain peaceful. The National Security Council says it has asked the Taliban to speed up the release of Afghan soldiers, reduce violence, and prepare for direct talks. Iraq's new government says it will release demonstrators arrested during last year's protests. In a televised address, Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi said all detainees would be released except those involved in killings. Meanwhile, anti-government rallies have resumed in the country. He also vowed to reveal the truth of what happened in the country, adding that he would hold all those who shed Iraqi blood accountable. Baghdad has also guaranteed to compensate the families of 550 people killed in the unrest. Al-Kadhimi and his cabinet won the Iraqi parliament's vote of confidence just this Wednesday. Upon taking the office, he said he would prioritize tackling the COVID-19 pandemic and bringing those who killed protesters in 2019 to justice. Iran says it is ready for a full prisoner exchange with the United States with preconditions. Talking to media, government spokesman Ali Rabai said Washington is yet to respond to Tehran's offer. Rabai said there is no need for a third country to mediate between Iran and America for the prisoner exchange. The spokesperson said Tehran is worried about the safety and health of Iranians in American jails. He said Tehran will hold Washington responsible for Iranian safety amid the new coronavirus outbreak. In a rare act of cooperation between two longtime foes, the United States and Iran swapped prisoners in 2019. Syria says the US sanctions and its listed exemptions result in facilitating terrorist elements in the war-torn country. Syria's UN ambassador Azhar Shahen said the curbs also prevent the country from providing its citizens with adequate medical assistance. In a webinar, Shahen said the US unilateral coercive measures on the Syrian banking sector have weakened the medical sector's ability to import supplies. He said foreign companies refrain from signing contracts with Syrian medical institutions, fearing to become a target of the sanctions. The diplomat said the US authorized exemptions only lead to the support of terrorist groups, sometimes in form of weaponry. Earlier in April, the UN said the US ignored repeated calls to waive sanctions that undermine the targeted nation's capacity to respond effectively to the pandemic. Australia has asked the International Criminal Court to not investigate Israel's war crimes in Palestine, saying it is not a state. It said the court prosecutor's investigation should be halted on jurisdictional grounds. Australia was lobbied to make the submission to the court by Israel, which is not a party to the court. But the office of the prosecutor has rejected Australia's argument, saying it had not formally challenged Palestine's right to be a party to the court before. Palestine's accession to the ICC in 2015 as a party to the court was accepted by the UN Secretary General. The prosecutor said there were reasonable grounds to believe that war crimes have been and are being committed in the West Bank by Israel's defense forces. Meanwhile, Palestine has formed a special committee to follow up on the state's measures in response to Israel's threat to annex parts of the West Bank. Venezuelan military says it has seized 3 abandoned Colombian light combat vessels that soldiers found while patrolling the Orinoco River. This comes days after the government accused its neighbor of aiding a failed invasion. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said the boats were equipped with machine guns and ammunition but had no crew. In a televised response, President Nicolas Maduro said Venezuela will raise the issue with the United Nations. He said his administration will file an official complaint against Colombia and the US for violating the international law with coup attempt.
I have no doubt that the Colombian President Ivan Duque was criminally and politically responsible for alleged incursion, and there is a need to accuse him before the International Criminal Court of the accusations that we are making against the United States. I have no doubt.
Brazil is observing a 3-day period of mourning for the victims of the novel coronavirus pandemic. Chamber of Deputies President Rodrigo Maia and Senate President Davi Alcolumbre promoted the decree. A joint statement by the Congress also urged the population to continue following the Health Ministry's recommendations. Meanwhile, hundreds of supporters of President Jair Bolsonaro blocked streets in the capital Brasilia amid mounting criticism of his handling of the pandemic. Bolsonaro has been critical of lockdown measures due to their impact on the economy, while he is also alleged to have interfered in federal police. Brazil is the virus ground zero in Latin America, with over 156,000 confirmed cases and over 10,600 deaths so far. Uganda's allied democratic forces have beheaded 3 people in an attack in the Ituri region in Congo's North Kivu province. Local media says armed forces of the Democratic Republic of Congo have pursued the attackers. Local media says it is the second attack blamed on ADF rebels in the area this week. It said the rebels killed 2 civilians in Mabatundo village late Thursday. Congo's armed forces launched an offensive against the ADF at the end of October. Originally from Uganda, the rebels have been accused of killing more than 1,000 people in the Beni area in the northern part of North Kivu since 2014. The UN has condemned the increasing attacks on civilians and humanitarian organizations in parts of the Central African Republic. In a statement, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said it recorded 10 attacks over the past 9 days in the northeastern town of Nidal. It said the situation on the ground is unbearable, with women and children being particularly exposed to the crisis. The statement said the attacks against the population and the humanitarian community have to stop. The UN called on parties to comply with their obligations under international law to respect and protect civilians and humanitarian workers as well as their assets. Now we're taking a short break. Stay tuned for more news. Welcome back. Health authorities in several Middle Eastern countries have confirmed more cases and related deaths due to the novel coronavirus. Kuwait announces 450 new infections, with the total in the country exceeding 7,600 cases.
Saudi Arabia reported more than 1,700 new coronavirus cases, bringing the total to over 37,000 infections. Health officials said 10 new deaths have been registered, raising the total number of fatalities to 239. Bahrain recorded 151 new active cases of COVID-19, taking the total to over 4,700. Qatar has confirmed more than 21,000 cases. In Lebanon, the total infections are at 809 and deaths at 26. Oman reported 154 new cases, with its total near 3,300. Egypt registered 495 cases of the coronavirus, its highest daily increase to date, as the number of deaths rose above 500.
Moving on to Poland, where presidential election will set off today with closed polling stations, and turnout will clock in at zero due to a political crisis over COVID-19 pandemic. Poland found itself in a bizarre predicament as the presidential ballot is constitutionally neither postponed nor cancelled. The situation arose after the government and opposition failed to agree on a safe solution. The ruling Law and Justice Party said Poland's COVID-19 situation is not severe enough to be declared as a natural disaster to lawfully postpone the polls. On Wednesday, PIS and its coalition party announced the election will be declared null and void. In Germany, thousands of people took to the streets across the country in protest against the restrictions imposed to curb coronavirus. Many of the protesters defied the guidelines, which call for a limited number of participants and for social distancing to be maintained during such events. Holding banners in their hands, people chanted slogans against the prolonged lockdown in the southwestern city of Stuttgart. In Berlin, hundreds of protesters gathered around the central square of Alexanderplatz and outside the parliament building. Police arrested some protesters as their number exceeded the permissible limit of 50. Meanwhile, in Munich, police used loudspeakers to urge the protesters to minimize the infection risk. Scientists say the coronavirus reproduction rate in Germany has risen to 1.1 days after Germany loosened many of its restrictions. The UK says it will proceed with extreme caution while exiting pandemic lockdown. Britain's Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says the move beyond COVID-19 would be gradual progress and not a single leap to freedom. At a briefing, Shapps said even if transport network runs at full capacity, social distancing rules will mean only 1 in 10 passengers can travel. He said more Britons should cycle or walk to work when countries' lockdown is eased to take the pressure of limited public transport capacity. Shapps also pledged £250 million emergency fund for improvements to cycling and walking infrastructure. The fund is the first installment of some £2 billion package for the purpose.
Announcing a £2 billion package to put cycling and walking at the heart of our transport policy. To set out how we deliver this, we'll bring forward a national cycling plan for publication in early June, in line with the statutory cycle and walking investment strategy to help double cycling and increase walking by 2025.
Portugal says it will take up to 60 unaccompanied children from Greek refugee camps. Socialist Party lawmaker Isabel Santos says the children are expected to arrive in Portugal within the next few weeks. Santos, who is a member of the European Parliament, did not specify any time frame of this process. Local media reported Santos said the children live under bad conditions in Greek refugee camps. Santos said refugee camp hosts triple, quadruple, and in many cases up to 5 times the population they are able to accommodate. 12 minors were transferred to Luxembourg in first relocation last month, and since then Germany has received around 50 children. Pakistan's esteemed writer and comedian Azhar Shahen breathed his last in Karachi today. Famously known as Jedi, the artist is survived by his wife and 4 sons. His family said, unwell for a while, Azhar Shahen died after suffering a severe stroke. He played the famous character of Jedi in different dramas and also received the Presidential Pride of Performance Award. He began his career at Radio Pakistan as a writer, following which he wrote 700 plays over the course of 20 years. Some of his most popular works were from the 1970s to 1990s, including Intezar Farmaiye, Baada Ba Mulahiza Hoshiar, and Hai Jedi. In the US, Little Richard, who is considered one of the founding fathers of rock and roll, has died at 87. He influenced generations of musicians and performers. Richard had been in poor health for several years, suffering hip problems, a stroke, and a heart attack. Little Richard's son, Danny Penniman, confirmed the musician's death due to bone cancer. Richard's performing career began when he was in mid-teens in the late 40s. The breakthrough came when he signed to Specialty Records in 1955, releasing a run of singles that were among the wildest and most flamboyant of the rock and roll era. He will be remembered for his outrageous performance style and brightly colored clothes, which was echoed later by Prince. Today, most of the countries are celebrating Mother's Day to express gratitude and honor motherhood and maternal bonds. With the pandemic putting beloved traditions on hold this year, people have still come up with creative ideas to appreciate mothers. Let's find out about this here in this report.
Each year, Mother's Day is celebrated in most of the countries on the second Sunday of May. Traditionally, there are gifts, dine-outs, parties and much more for mothers on this day, but it is not going to be the case this year. However, in Los Angeles, keeping in mind the mass unemployment due to COVID-19, County Federation of Labor is celebrating the day with the theme of gathering families over food.
But that's our theme here today. We wanted to project that, let the community know that we're doing this for the moms here and to help them actually, gather their family through meal and know that they'll get through this thing, and we'll all get through this thing together.
Mother's Day is traditionally one of the busiest holidays for the flower business. Considering them low-risk stores, California Governor Gavin Newsom gave the green light to the retail florist to begin opening.
That was too high for everybody, and today this is the best what happened for us, for everybody, for all the people, not only for us, not only from a business, for everybody. Yeah, everybody's a pain. People who sell them in the street, the flower shop, the wholesalers. This is the best that happened,
With lockdowns and stay-at-home orders increasing tensions, a common celebration of Mother's Day around the world has given people a chance to witness some normalcy.
Kuwait's Emir Sheikh Ahmad Al Sabah said decline in oil prices will have an adverse impact on the financial solvency of the state. The Emir said Kuwait is facing the challenge of shielding its economy from external shock caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. It wasn't clear if the comment meant that Kuwait could delay the payment of government dues. Moody's Investor Service has placed Kuwait's A2 long-term issuer rating on review for downgrade. It cited significant decline in government revenue from the collapse in oil prices. The report pointed out uncertainty that the government will be able to access sufficient sources of financing at a time of increased need. Elon Musk has threatened to move Tesla headquarters out of California to Nevada in Texas. The announcement comes after the state's health department refused to let Tesla factory reopen on Friday, citing lockdown measures. Musk said Tesla is filing a lawsuit against Alameda County. He said factory's future in the county can now be in doubt, as it will be dependent on how Tesla is treated in the future. California's government has eased some restrictions around the state this week, allowing businesses to resume operations. But several Bay Area counties have issued their own criteria for which businesses may reopen, which take precedence. The factory employs over 10,000 workers and makes about 415,000 vehicles every year. Gulf stock markets are trading mixed as most of the regional indexes track gains in global markets on Friday, shrugging off upsetting U.S. jobs data. The Dubai benchmark DFMGI has dropped nearly 2% as major banking and airline stocks edged lower. Qatar Stock Exchange has gained over 1%, while Bursa Kuwait has lost nearly 1%. Saudi Arabia's Tadawul is trading over 0.5% higher. Abu Dhabi Securities Exchange has gained a fraction, while Muscat Securities Market has lost a fraction in a range-bound session. Bahrain Bourse is trading marginally higher. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.